So I promised myself. I promised myself that I was not going to do another Sports Central episode part of the Closing Tag Network. But then I found myself in the grocery store just a little while ago getting some cat litter for my little kitty, the one that you've probably seen on here a couple times. When all of a sudden my phone goes off. I'm going, what's going on here? Oh shit. And I get notified that the Seattle Seahawks have announced that Pete Carroll is stepping away as the head coach of the Seahawks. He'll be staying on board as an advisor of sorts, but he will no longer be a coach in the team. And that may be the most shocking news of this entire week. Even more shocking than the Tennessee Titans firing their head coach, Mike Vrabel, which that happened shortly after I got done recording. Thanks. So my immediate thoughts about both the Mike Vrabel firing and Pete Carroll stepping away, and I'm using air quotes on that because I don't suspect that he did this voluntarily out of the kindness of his heart. I'll tell you why. He announced right after the game the other day, the win over the Arizona Cardinals, that he wasn't going anywhere. As far as he was concerned, he was still coaching the team, so on and so forth, And 2 days later, he's stepping away to be an advisor. Something's off. And I find the timing of this especially suspect when you have both Mike Vrabel available as a head coach in the NFL, but you also now have Jim Harbaugh. And I mentioned the other day, Jim Harbaugh was probably using the NFL as a bargaining chip. Well, Michigan called him on his bluff. And rumors are running rampant out of Michigan that they have decided to not renew Jim Harbaugh's contract. As of right now, Jim Harbaugh is free and clear to talk to any and every NFL team to be their next head coach. I find the timing of this announcement from Pete Carroll very suspicious. However, I'm not entirely upset. The man is 72 years old. He looks spry for 72. The dude is energetic as all hell. I will grant him that. Have him bottle some of that up and give it to me. I will pay a fortune for that shit. But he's 72 years old. We can't discount that. So he's not getting any younger. And the NFL, as we are seeing more and more every day, especially at the head coaching position, is becoming more and more of a young man's game. You look at Kyle Shanahan, who's under 50. You look at a guy like Doug Peterson. Okay, maybe Doug Peterson's a bad example. But like Sean McVay, who is barely over 30. You have players playing for the Rams that are older than he is. And for a 72-year-old guy, I'm sure he's looking more and more like a fossil, like a relic of a time long gone. This is becoming more and more of a young man's game. And if you really look at what the Seahawks were doing defensively, especially throughout the season, it's some of the same old over and over and over. Every time that the Seahawks would line up, they're lining up in a 3-4. So opposing teams took that as a sign of, well, we can just run the ball on these guys. Because at 3-4, that would be 3 defensive linemen, 4 linebackers, and then the rest of the defense is in the secondary. Running that 3-4 defense, they're not great defensively. In fact, they're not even good defensively. And that's been Seattle's calling card during the entire Pete Carroll run, is defense, more so than Russell Wilson or Marshawn Lynch, beast mode. More so than those guys, the defense, the Legion of Boom, has been the calling card for the Pete Carroll era in Seattle. So even though he's stepping away as a head coach and remaining on as an advisor, I think we're going to see a lot of changes for the Seahawks. Now, whether those changes involve bringing in a Jim Harbaugh or bringing in a Mike Vrabel, who, by the way, is excellent as a defensive head coach. I mean, bring him in, yes, please, and thank you. Or an Eric Bieniemy, who just happens to be talking to other teams and just happens to be a defensive coordinator. Just saying. Whether it's any of those guys or whether they're bringing in somebody completely new or whether they decide to go in a completely different direction and go offense, I think Pete Carroll's legacy is going to be tough to top. We're talking about a guy who took Seattle. I mean, say what you want about Pete Carroll and his time at USC, and it's probably all valid. He was a cheater. He paid off, investors or whatnot, and broke several rules in the NCAA, and that's why he went to the NFL to be a head coach in the first place. And it's probably all valid. I will not discount that. But from the time that he showed up in Seattle, he turned that team into a power. Almost immediately, the defense in Seattle was one of the best that the NFL had ever seen. We were comparing the Legion of Boom defense to defenses like the Steel Curtain and the 85 Chicago Bears. That's how good that defense was at one point. So whoever steps up, whoever takes over, is going to have to contend with that. Whoever takes over is going to have to contend with the fact that you're replacing a head coach that took the Seahawks to 2 Super Bowls and won one. Seattle is not a Super Bowl town, does not have a Lombardi trophy sitting in Pike's Place or wherever they have it right now, if not for the fact that Pete Carroll coached the hell out of that team. And I liken the replacing of Pete Carroll although the comparison is not as successful, to when the Utah Jazz had to replace Jerry Sloan. You remember Jerry Sloan had to step away also because of age, but also because, ownership at the time wasn't, very fond of him. He had lost the players. He especially had lost, Darren Williams, who just days before he resigned was traded to Brooklyn. So there's some comparisons. And if you remember, the head coach that took over for the Jazz immediately after Jerry Sloan, Ty Corbin, did not do a great job. I would argue that in the post-Frank Layden era, that Ty Corbin is the worst head coach in Utah Jazz history. I'm not old enough to remember anybody before Frank Layden, so I can't speak to anybody that came along before Frank Layden. But all I know is that Ty Corbin was the worst head coach in Jazz history after Frank Layden. So, that's not a very long list, but still. I would suspect that whoever takes over is probably not going to be any worse than Mike Holmgren, or I can't remember the head coach that was there before Holmgren, but needless to say, if they've got Pete Carroll, there as an advisor, they're going to be okay. I suspect they're going to be okay. But change is definitely coming, and this is the first domino to fall. I would suspect that there are going to be some changes as far as personnel, especially the offensive and defensive coordinators. I suspect there's going to be changes with the players. There's been rumors going around as to what the Seahawks are going to do ultimately about the quarterback position. Is Geno Smith going to be sticking around? Is Drew Lock going to be sticking around? Please, for the love of fucking God, no. Will they pick up Michael Penix Jr. from Washington in the draft? And I know Michael Penix Jr. he's got some question marks. He's got some things that scouts are really suspicious about. His injury history to be, first and foremost on everyone's mind. But you can't deny that the guy is an excellent quarterback. He may not have won the national championship, but I think that he will take that as a learning experience. And if you keep Geno Smith around and you draft Michael Penix Jr. and he learns from Geno Smith, and I've had my issues with Geno Smith in the past. Even as recently as Monday, I was calling him a career bum who had one good year. But you can't deny the fact that he's got a lot of veteran experience that could prove to be useful, that could prove to be, valuable to, younger quarterbacks. The big thing that a lot of people seem to have an issue with Geno Smith is that the Seahawks traded Russell Wilson, and people expected that the guy that was going to take over for Russ was going to immediately, put up gangbuster numbers, and it was never going to be like that. You weren't going to have an all-pro quarterback just immediately take over for Russell Wilson in Seattle. Who do you think you guys are? The Dallas Cowboys? The Green Bay Packers? That's why I say keep Geno around. Yeah, the next year is going to suck. But if you coach the hell out of that defense who's got some excellent players on that side. You've got a guy like Witherspoon. I forget the guy's first name. Who is already a defensive stud as a rookie. That linebacker core led by Bobby Wagner, who, by the way, is already declared that he's coming back next year. I don't know how you don't bring a guy like Bobby Wagner back, even if he has nothing left to give physically. He's got a lot to give mentally. That's why you keep a guy like Bobby Wagner around. That's why you keep a guy like Geno Smith around, so that they can coach the younger guys and mentor them and bring them up to speed. So if you coach the hell out of that defense, you can have, I mean, look at the Baltimore Ravens from like 2000, 2001. They had Trent fucking Dilfer as the quarterback. And yet they won a Super Bowl because of that defense. Because they had a legendary defense that was probably top 5 all time. So if you bring back Bobby Wagner and you bring back Geno Smith, yeah, the offense is going to suffer. But that defense, if you play your cards right, can be great. And can be good enough for them to make even a wild card run. I don't know if you're going to top the 49ers at this point. I think San Francisco's pretty much taking the division for the next 5 years. Or as long as Christian McCaffrey is healthy. I wasn't prepared to make that statement before. I am now. But I think if you keep the defense good and you keep the offense manageable, whoever the head coach is, whether it be Mike Vrabel or Jim Harbaugh or Bill Belichick or Pete Carroll Light or whoever it is, whoever the coach is, I think they're going to be just fine. As long as you don't compare them to Pete Carroll. And for Pete Carroll, whether he's a head coach, whether he's an advisor, whether he ends up going to a retirement home in a few years, he will never have to buy another beer in the town of Seattle ever again. That town was desperate for a win, for a championship team. Much like the town of Salt Lake City, Utah, is desperate for a championship team. And Pete Carroll gave Seattle one. For that, Pete Carroll will forever have the gratitude of Seahawks fans and the town of Seattle, Washington. Thank you, Pete Carroll. And many happy adventures in your life and in your future. If you want to leave a review on Spotify, you have that ability. If you want to, if you're watching this on Facebook, like, share, and comment. If you're watching this on YouTube, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell for notifications. That way, if an emergency pod like this one drops, you are notified. And much like I thank Pete Carroll for, bringing the Seahawks to prominence as a Seahawks fan, I also want to thank you for listening, for watching, for downloading, for donating, for doing everything you can to support this this podcast, your efforts do not go unnoticed. So thank you. And I promise I'm done with sports for the week. Maybe. Short of maybe LeBron James getting traded. Yeah, that'll be the day, right? Short of a major trade going on in the NBA, I think I'm pretty much done with sports for the week. So I think the next time you'll see me, I'll probably be on Are We Not Entertained, or maybe even News Desk, assuming something breaks with politics or whatnot, or even Tech Talk. I don't know. Something. I'll think of something, I'm sure. But anyway, thank you guys for listening and for watching. And as always, remember to include your closing tags. Thanks.